Welcome to another episode of Considering the Source. I'm your host, Scott Roark. In this episode, we're talking to a friend of mine who I've known for many years. You're going to meet Doug. Now, when I met Doug, I was roughly 15 years old, and Doug was actually my camp counselor. Granted, this happened many, many years ago. But our lives did cross paths from time to time over the years, and we've stayed in touch. But this interview is really the most in-depth conversation I've ever had with him, and it was a very good one. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and split this conversation into two parts. Now, in episode 1 here, you're going to hear about Doug's childhood and some of the effects of his parents' divorce, how that affected him when he was really young, how he dealt with his abusive stepfather. And also in this episode, we're going to hear about his decision later to join the Marines and some of the things that he experienced while he was there. So I hope you enjoy this. This is my friend, Doug. You're born and raised in Cleveland. You're a Cleveland boy.
Mm-hmm.
You have any brothers or sisters?
2 brothers.
Older or younger?
Both older.
Both older. How much older?
Randy is 4 years, Chris is 5 years.
Okay. So were you mistaken or were you definitely planned?
Well, that's a two-part answer. My mother had really bad, hard pregnancies.
Really?
Are we on now?
Yeah.
Okay, my mother had really bad pregnancies back in the 60s. They didn't have the technology that they have now. So after my brother Randy was born, they told her she would never have another child. So in that sense, I was not planned.
Right.
Once she got pregnant, they told her that if you go forward with this pregnancy, there's a good chance one or both of you may die. And she said, I'm having this baby. Well, neither one of us died, so God had his hand in on it. Took care of both of us. But so I was not planned, and after the fact, I was very deliberate.
What does that mean?
Well, she made a decision that she was going to have this baby.
Gotcha.
Whether it killed her or killed me, she was going to go through with it.
Yeah.
So, it was courageous on her part, and without her making that decision, I wouldn't be here.
Yeah. And you're born and raised in Cleveland.
Yeah.
Where were you born?
Roundabout.
Do you remember?
Eastlake.
In Eastlake.
That hospital's no longer there, but
so that's east side.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hence the term east, but it's out there by Euclid.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And had your parents always lived there?
No, my dad was from Mansfield.
Okay.
Well, my parents lived on the east side.
Okay.
And while they were together, we always lived on the east side, but we moved I could give you a tour of the east side, and including suburbs with all the moving around we did. And I don't really know why, because I was too young. But we moved, Eastlake, Chardon, Kirtland, Menor, Paynesville. We were all over the east side.
Really?
Yeah.
And were these all be numerous moves within one calendar year, or?
I was too little. I just know that, it seemed like when our lease was up, we moved somewhere else. I don't really know the why.
Okay. Well, I'd asked you in one of the surveys, what was one of your earliest childhood memories, and you mentioned, do you remember that?
Yes. That was, I want to say it's over off of maybe East 185th Street. I forget exactly where, but over on the east side, there is, around the East 185th, that's the one that sticks in my head, there's a golf course now. Well, that golf course used to be government housing.
Really?
And we lived in that housing project. And we had to move because they tore the project down to build the golf course.
Oh my.
So now this goes back, honestly, Scott, I was probably 3 years old. Earliest childhood memory. I remember being in diapers, so.
And do you remember feeling something, or you can just you had the picture in your mind?
I have snapshots.
Yeah.
Snapshots in my mind. I can see the playground that we went to. The way the block was constructed, all the homes were on the outside of the block, and the interior part of the block was a sidewalk that went around the perimeter, and then inside of the sidewalk was like a playground area. Mm-hmm. So I can see snapshots, and I know that I wasn't yet 4 years old, so it was, 3, 4 years old.
Okay.
And I remember wearing my shorts, and my dad would be running the lawnmower, and the grass would be shooting out, hitting me in the legs, and to a 3 or 4 year old, that felt like bees stinging you, know?
Yeah.
So I hated the lawnmower.
I still hate the lawnmower.
Yes.
You mentioned that your parents divorced at some point in time.
Mm-hmm.
How old were you then?
Around about first grade. I think it was right about first grade. And that's one of those, I don't know how old I was, but that's something I'll never forget.
Okay.
It was really dramatic. Again, I was young enough that I didn't know what was going on in the family. I was oblivious to the adult things that were happening. I just remember my mom came home one night and got us all in a little huddle and said, Dad's not coming home anymore. And that was sort of how we found out that our parents were splitting up.
Now, was this something, like as a 6-year-old kid, like, do you remember like fighting and arguing? And
no. If they fought, if they argued, they either kept it out of my sight, or again, I was just oblivious in my own little six-year-old world. I didn't know. I didn't have any idea that this was going on, and it was a big shock. And we sat there in a pile and cried all night. The four of us.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure you asked why.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure it occurred to me to ask why. I imagine I did, because my dad was, my mom was, in as much as my mom was my parent, my dad was my hero. Mm-hmm. And suddenly my hero was gone. Mm-hmm. So it was a big shock. It was a big blow.
How did it affect your brothers?
Well, I think my brother Randy, the next one up from me, he was, I think he took it like I did. He was very upset about it. Who wouldn't be? My brother Chris really carried a lifetime grudge.
Really?
Yeah. And
towards
my father. And he had some personal things that, if you were to talk to him, he sees things one way. If you were to talk to my dad, and he saw things a different way. And as far as I was concerned, it was all a big misunderstanding. But Chris never forgave my dad. And in his later years, my dad tried to make peace, and actually, right along, my dad tried to make peace, and Chris didn't want anything to do with him. And my dad got cancer about 12 years ago, I guess, and it took him really fast.
How fast?
Months. I was in Arizona at the time. I had moved out to Phoenix, and I was training for a job. And I guess from the time he was diagnosed, because he had felt sick for a while, mm-hmm. My dad was not a sickly person. Mm-hmm. So I would talk to him on the phone, and he would say, "My stomach hurts. I don't know what's going on. My stomach hurts. I just don't feel good." And, he wasn't a sickly person, so he'd, "Well, why don't you you'd say, "Why don't you take a break, Dad? Take it easy. Go watch some football or something. You don't have to work so hard," because he was a hard-working guy. He worked harder after he retired than he did when he worked, Uh-huh. And then I'd call him and follow up with him again, and he'd say, "I just don't feel good. I don't feel good." And, I was 2,000 miles away, so I could only go by what he said on the phone, but he didn't sound like he felt well, but he didn't sound like it was anything bad.
Yeah.
And he was attending church, I think out in Middlefield, Ohio somewhere. And apparently his pastor stopped by to check on him. And when his pastor saw him, he said, "Chuck, you need to get to the hospital now."
Okay.
Because he could tell just by looking at him that he was not okay.
Yeah. So
they did some tests, and at first the tests came up negative, and then they did some more tests, and said he had, they misdiagnosed, and then they did some more tests. They did a biopsy, and eventually found that he had cancer, and that would have been like November, and he died in January.
Like 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, by the time it was diagnosed, it was just so quick. And my brother told me that he was sick, and I was really kind of torn, because I was in the middle of job training, for a new position. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, it's just a couple of more weeks. I'll be done in a couple of weeks, and then I'll go home right away. And I think I mentioned in the interview, and I might get a little misty here, but
Yeah.
I stayed and completed my job training and got home as quickly as I could. And by the time I got home, I walked into the hospital room. And the man that was laying there, I couldn't recognize as my father. It had aged him 30 years and 2 months. And he was not conscious, although when I got there, I grabbed his hand and told him I was there. And my brother thinks that he knew I was there. Because up to that point, he had pretty much laid relatively motionless.
Okay.
And when I got there, said, "Dad, it's me."
There was some
He didn't open
restlessness.
his eyes, but his physical response was such that we thought maybe he knew I was there.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know if he knew I was there. So that torments me because I didn't get to say goodbye, or he didn't get to say goodbye. And I love my dad dearly, and I hate to think that I missed him.
Yeah. And that was about, you said 15 or so years ago.
Yeah, I want to say it was around. I feel bad for not knowing the exact time frame, but it was about 05, I guess, probably about 10 years ago.
Okay.
So
Well,
it just torments me that
sure.
that I may not have gotten there in time for him to know that I was there.
Yeah. Well, let's back up a little bit. Let's back up. So your mom comes in, you guys are gathered up, and you have this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of everybody's upset about it, your mom included. And was there ever a time that your mom and dad ever tried to reconcile? Did he ever come back into the house for any time being, or?
Yeah, there was serious discussion about it at one point, and we'd have to go probably 5 years further down the road.
Okay.
And I'm not sure exactly what was happening, but my mom was with the man who would then eventually be my stepfather.
Okay.
And he was an alcoholic. He was not very nice. He was physically abusive. He was psychologically abusive. Go down the line, and that's what he was. He was everything I didn't want to be in my life.
Yeah.
And
So you're about 11 years old now. When that
probably
happened.
right around there, 11, 12. I think it's 6th grade or so.
Yeah.
And where we lived, my grandmother actually lived right across the street.
Okay.
Now, I'm not sure, again, I was aware of the goings-on at this point, but only in so much as I was aware of the goings-on. I didn't know the details. I didn't really know how they got to be talking, but
Who talked?
my dad and my mom.
Gotcha.
My mom, I think, was very unhappy, as I would have expected, and I think she was trying to get away from her then boyfriend. And,
Okay.
And her and my dad started talking again, and I think they were seriously considering getting back together. And then when my stepfather found out about it, the way I understand it was he threatened my dad with beating within an inch of his life if he didn't go away. And,
Really?
So I don't know what my dad's response was, because he never talked to me about it,
But he didn't pursue it anymore.
that kind of put an end to it. I'm sure my dad said, "Hey, I don't want anything to do with this,
Yeah.
You finish up things with that guy and then come see me."
Okay. And she did not.
No, they ended up getting married.
You said that he was abusive in numerous ways.
Mm-hmm.
Abusive towards your mother, towards you, towards everybody?
More so towards me and my mom. A little bit with my older brother. My oldest brother latched onto him as a father figure because he was, of course, angry
with
at
your
his
dad.
actual father. So they had a good bond, but he wasn't going to replace my father to me.
Okay.
And I think he resented me for that. I wasn't, I wasn't demonstrative towards him. I just was never going to, he was never going to replace my father. I loved my father.
And you weren't ever going to call him Dad
Oh,
or
no,
anything like that?
No.
He was just going to be Bob.
Yeah, exactly. He was who he was.
Yeah.
And I didn't act badly towards him. I didn't hold any resentment towards him. But I think it was the other way around. So he would, he would get aggravated and he might hit me. He would definitely put me down.
What do you mean? Oh, just verbally put you down?
Yeah, verbally, in fact, when I went to school, he knew where I went to school. When I went to school, he told me I would never make anything of myself there, and when I failed, I was going to be coming home. And that would be that. I wouldn't go back.
And he would say this in front of your mother, or this is when in the hallway? He didn't care at all?
No, he didn't care.
Did Mom defend you? Did she tell him to shut up or anything?
I think she was afraid to. I mean, I think she tried to in a way such that she didn't ruffle his feathers too much.
Yeah.
Because again, especially if he were drinking, he was a very violent drunk. And if he were drinking, he was Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He'd be fun-loving and happy one minute, and the next minute everybody's getting slapped around the house.
Yeah. So
I think it was a matter of, she defended me in as much as she could without, without
pushing him too far.
Pushing him to the point of
violence.
Rage.
Yeah. All right, so, but he hit you. Did he hit your other brother too?
You know what? I don't think he ever hit Randy, but I do know that I shouldn't even say his name. I don't know that he ever hit my brother.
Yeah.
But I know at one point, and I would say he would have been about, he would have been about 13 years old, I guess. And, at 13, kids can get a little mouthy,
yeah,
pushing the boundaries. So I don't remember exactly what happened, but I think it was simply a matter of go to bed. And my brother mumbled something under his breath, and he walked in there and grabbed him by the neck and pinned him up against the wall and said, if you say something like that, I'll kill you. To a 13-year-old boy.
Yeah.
And he was a large man, so, he was scary.
Okay.
To a kid. So I don't think he ever hit him beyond that, but...
Just choked him.
I got hit.
Was he hitting you just open hand or with a fist or with objects or all the above or?
With his hands. I think that it was usually an open hand slap to the head, to the face.
And then would you just go into your room and just wish death on him?
Usually I would, I don't know, I had some defiance in me even though he scared me. I remember one time he yelled at me because I wasn't doing the dishes properly. I don't know. I did them the way I thought they were supposed to be done, but he didn't like the way I was doing the dishes. And I said, well, I did them. I washed them. They're clean. And he didn't like that answer. And when I saw him draw back to swing at me, I remember covering up my head and I said, you're not my dad. I don't have to listen to you. Right before impact. So that was sort of my only defense, because you're a kid. What else can you do besides say, hey, you're not going to break me? And that was basically what I was doing, was saying, you can hit me all you want.
Yeah. Would you make determinations in your head like I'm not going to cry or I'm not going to let this guy see me, he's not going to break me?
The only determination I ever made in my head, and this was something I can be proud of, is because they say so often that you're people that grow up in a violent home, an abusive home, tend to carry that cycle on.
Okay.
And he embodied everything I didn't want to be when I grew up. And somehow, by the grace of God, I was able to keep that pledge, if you will.
Yeah.
That, I wasn't going to be what he was. I wasn't going to become a product of my environment. So I didn't, that was sort of my, if you want to say my mindset.
Mm-hmm.
was that I wasn't going to become him. I wasn't going to let him turn me into what he was.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I guess you could still say I'm a product of my environment.
Sure.
But I didn't become that.
Conversely, right.
Yes.
During this time, I presume there's still interaction with your actual dad.
Yeah, he would come and see us occasionally, or
Okay.
we would go for visits.
All right. How did you get along with your brothers growing up?
I think it was a typical house full of boys growing up.
What did they do to you? As the youngest, I know they did something to you.
Well, I mean, we were rough, so I want to say beatings. I mean, it didn't beat me till I was bloody, but I used to say my mom, at one point, she had to work 2 or 3 jobs to try to keep us in a decent neighborhood and try to keep us in a decent home. So mom was away from the house. In fact, if you were away from the house as much as my mom was then, if you did that now, child services would probably come knocking on your door, right?
Because she was just working so much.
She was working all the time to try to keep us in a good place, which left, I don't know, I was probably 7 years old, and then, 12, 13-year-old kids, we were just in the house by ourselves all the time. So we fought like cats and dogs, and I like to tell the story that my brother just above me, he always liked to watch these cheesy sci-fi Godzilla, Frankenstein movies, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people love those movies. I hated them. I wanted to watch Bugs Bunny. So he would be watching, there used to be a show in Cleveland called Superhost. Mm-hmm. He'd be watching Superhost. Whatever B-movie Superhost had on, that's what we'd be watching. I just couldn't stand it. So I would tolerate it as long as I could tolerate it, and then eventually I'd get up and I'd turn the station.
In the middle of the show?
Yeah, I was done. So I'd turn it, or he'd get up to go to the bathroom or something, and I'd turn it to Bugs Bunny or whatever I wanted to watch. Of course, back then we had 3, 5, and 8.
That's
what we had, right?
Yeah, there's no pause, there's no recording.
Right.
Yeah.
So I would turn it to my station, and then he would come back in and he'd turn it back to his station, which I would take offense to. So I'd get back up, and of course we didn't have remotes either, so we had to get up and physically turn the station. And I'd turn it back, and then he'd turn it back. So he would tolerate that for only so long, and then the beating would ensue. So he would pound on me, and he'd go away. I'd run away crying and run to my room and lick my wounds, and then he'd turn it back to his station. Well, I guess I always had a bit of defiance in me, or I just didn't know any better, and I was too stupid to figure out that A plus B equals C. So once I finally got done, licking my wounds, I'd come back and daggone it, I'm going to watch Bugs Bunny. Uh-huh. So now the whole cycle would start all over again. So after a certain amount of time, I would get beat so many times, we'd run through this cycle like all afternoon. Eventually, my oldest brother would get tired of it, and he'd yell at my brother and tell me, my other brother, and tell him to stop, knock it off.
Yeah.
Leave him alone.
Yeah.
Well, then he'd say, why don't you make me leave him alone? So those two would start fighting, and I got to watch Bugs Bunny.
It only took you 7 hours,
right.
And then you get those two fighting.
So until there was a victor over there, I got to watch TV. And then if my brother above me won, well, then here we go back to Superhost again, and it all starts all over again. So that was very typical of our days when Mom was at work.
Now, did the stepdad, did he work as well?
Yeah, he was a truck driver.
Okay, so he was gone during the week?
At that point in time, I think at that point in time, he was an over-the-road driver, so he would be on the road for 2, 3, 4 days at a time.
Yep. All right. So at some point in time, you leave Cleveland. So to the listener, Doug and I both attended this academy, a Christian academy. Now, at some point in time, now this is Mount Vernon Academy. It's a Seventh-day Adventist school. Had you been raised Seventh-day Adventist, or how did you end up going to Mount Vernon? Were you going to Adventist schools when you were in Cleveland? Or?
Yes.
You were?
My grandmother was a very strong Adventist.
Okay.
And that was the religion of our family, if you will.
And you going to church every Saturday and everything, or?
Until my parents split up. We went to church I won't say where, but we went to church every Saturday.
And was this your, this is with so was your dad, was he Seventh-day Adventist?
Yeah.
Was this his mother, when you say your grandmother?
No, it was actually my mom's mother.
Okay.
My dad's grandmother lived in California, and she was a Seventh-day Adventist as well. I'm not sure how my mom and dad got together.
Okay.
I'm not sure how that came about, but anyway, we were SDAs, and up until my parents divorced or split, we were in church every week.
Okay. Why, when they split, did all of a sudden you weren't going to church?
I think that there's a certain shame factor, and my mom was embarrassed. She still kept us in church, but she didn't go herself.
So she would drop you off?
She would drop us off, or when we moved to the west side, there was actually a family that was really nice and kind family, and they took us kind of under their wing. They knew my grandmother,
okay,
and they would come by every Saturday
and pick you up
and pick us up and take us to church. And even beyond that, if there was youth activities going on, if there were camping trips, if there was anything, they treated us like we were part of their family. And they always, if they were doing it, then we were allowed to do it, or we were able to do it. So it was really nice, and it was a blessing that they were in our lives.
Do you still know that family?
In as much as Facebook allows
Okay.
me to interact with them, I'm friends with them on Facebook. Some of them. It's a very big family. But I'm friends with a few of them on my Facebook page.
Okay.
We interact a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. So now here's the thing. You're telling me, that your mom's working numerous jobs
Mm-hmm.
to go to provide for you guys.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you guys are all going to Adventist schools then, elementary schools, is that right?
Back then there was, and I don't know if you were aware of it, because I don't know at what point you came to Cleveland or if you're always from Cleveland, but back then there was a school on the east side called Cleveland Junior Academy.
Okay.
In one of the rougher parts of town, but...
Is that around Lee?
I think it's off of Cedar.
Okay.
I think it's off of Cedar. Like East 200th area.
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly where it's at, but if anybody hears this and they know it, they'll know exactly where it was at. But anyway, we went to Cleveland Junior Academy.
Okay.
And I went there for first grade. And then when my parents divorced, we moved to the west side. The biggest reason for that, I think, was because my mom's family was predominantly on the west side. So she moved to be closer to her family. So at that point, we went to Lakewood.
Yeah.
And I went to Lakewood until such time where we moved to Brunswick, Ohio. And then when we got to Brunswick, we just went to public school.
Oh, I didn't know I lived in Brunswick
Right,
too.
right.
Oh, wow. So,
Got a lot of family there.
Still in Brunswick?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. Okay, so then it makes more sense. So part of what your mom's working for is to just pay for the education, because that wasn't going to be cheap.
I think we had, aid coming from the church, and people were trying to help out. But yeah, she was, and my mom also wasn't educated. She was a waitress. She worked in a deli and a grocery store. She didn't make a lot of money. She worked very hard.
Yeah.
She just didn't get a lot in return for her work. So to try to keep us, in church, in school, and keep us from growing up to be hoodlums, she she worked really hard to do what she could to see to it that we were not in a bad place.
Right. Well, did your older brothers, did they go to Mount Vernon as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we all graduated.
Okay. What did you think of Mount Vernon? How did you like those years you were there?
Well, again, her and my stepfather were together at that point. And to me, Mount Vernon was, I don't know what it was to a lot of other people, but to me it was sanctuary. When we got to go home on the weekends, or we got to go, Christmas leaves, I never went home. I didn't want to go home. So for me, there was no better place, there was no safer place than to be at school.
So, to the listener, Mount Vernon is a boarding academy, so there'll be kids coming to it from all over the Ohio, all over the state, or farther, and they literally are living there. So those 4 years were great for you.
Yeah, I loved it.
So on home leave is like once a month, I think. Everybody gets out of school like on a Wednesday.
Something like that.
And you go home until next Sunday.
And you spend the weekend at home.
So where were you going then if you didn't?
I stayed at school and worked.
Okay.
Or I had some friends in the village, and I would stay at their house.
Yeah.
One time, I remember they actually closed down the school, and I had a first floor room in the new wing, and I just left my window unlocked. And after everybody was gone, I snuck back in, and I stayed in my room anyway. I stayed in a dorm all by myself.
Was the power off?
No, the power was on.
They left the power on?
But they just locked up all the buildings.
Sure.
All the faculty, all the staff, all the students, everybody was gone except for me.
What year was that? What year do you think you were?
I think that was probably 83. I think it was my sophomore year.
Okay. So, so you're, I'm sure, well aware now that this Mount Vernon Academy this year is going to be theoretically, it's going to be take a miracle for it to turn around. But this will be the last year. It's going to be closing down, and next weekend is the final alumni weekend. And at this academy, every year, people from everybody who's graduated comes back there. Are you heading down there next weekend, do you think?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. Actually, I've got a trip to make to Denver next week, and I'm making sure that I get back in time to go. And I guess, again, to the listener, you have class reunions, but we have class reunions for everybody that ever went to the school every year.
Yeah.
So it's a big deal, but it's also very sad to me, even though I haven't been back many times over the years.
Yeah.
It's a place that's very dear in my heart, and it makes me sad to think that it's not going to be there.
You know,
as it was.
My story with Mount Vernon was so we were living in Tennessee. I was a junior, and my dad opted to take a job in Saudi Arabia teaching. He signed a 2-year contract. And so the way the deal would work is that they were going to pay for my sister and I to go to school, to a boarding academy. And so we had this choice between, so there I'm in Tennessee. I could have went to GCA, Georgia Cumberland Academy, or I could have went to Mount Vernon. I mean, I could have went anywhere, but those were really the two. And then I ended up going to I went to camp and met a girl. That's all she wrote. That's all she wrote. And so Mount Vernon it was.
Story.
But so I was just at Mount Vernon my senior year, and it was a good year. But for me, being totally transparent here, like I'm watching on Facebook, I'm watching all the alumni, and I'm watching. I can hear and I can feel their pain for Mount Vernon closing, and I'm on the other end, and for me, Mount Vernon represents Adventism, and because I'm so opposed to it, I don't feel that pain. Like, and at the same time, like for you, Mount Vernon was sanctuary. So those 4 years represent freedom and health and everything. Whereas for me, when I looked at it, it was when my parents were gone. Like I couldn't be with them, and so my parents couldn't see me play basketball, and my parents couldn't, and so it wasn't a great. I mean, it was a good year for me, but emotionally it wasn't, and still, it represents Adventism to me. And so I know in my heart of hearts, I have some baggage. So there's this part of me that I'm not upset, like I'm okay. But I know that for a lot of people, it's going to be a bit sad. I never would have, like, I haven't gone down to alumni weekend in a few years, because it's just because it all represents Adventism to me, and so I'm like, I just don't want to. It bothers me, but I'm going to go down this time. I booked a hotel in Mansfield because everything in Mount Vernon.
Yeah, we're camping.
Are you really?
Yeah, there's a campsite 5 miles from the school, and we just thought,
Oh, nice.
Instead of spending all that money on a hotel,
Yeah.
we'll just set up a tent. Kids can go fishing and do whatever they want to do, and
Nice.
we can go visit.
Well, I'll see you there then. So, back to Mount Vernon. You made some friends there, I know, that you still have for the rest of your life. What was your plan after Mount Vernon? What did you want to do?
Well, this is one of those things that it's funny that you mentioned the negatives of Academy. We didn't have a lot of money.
Yeah.
And again, for those listening, you sort of had two groups of kids. You had the kids that had the money and could afford to go to school and could look down the road at college and careers and this and that and the other thing. And then you had the kids that were there who got financial aid from their church, or they got help or assistance from some other means, and it was really just a blessing for them that they were able to even be there if they so chose. So I fell into that second category. I didn't really have plans. I had aspirations. I had things that I wanted to do. But I didn't really have plans because I kind of felt like plans were for the kids that had money. So the weird thing was, or the thing that I wasn't prepared for was, I think in a traditional school, you have your friends, they live by you, they're your neighbors, you see them every day, and when you graduate school, not much changes. You still see them unless you go off to college and make new friends and do things. Well, my friends, and again, Academy, there was, I think when I graduated, my class had 32 kids in it. And the whole school only had about 130 kids in it, right?
Yep.
So I had 130 friends that I lived with and worked with and fought with and, whatever, every day. What I wasn't prepared for was I had been away from home for 4 years. And in those 4 years, of course, my mom moved at least once or twice.
Yeah.
So school's out. I go home, and I get home, and I think, okay, now what?
Right.
It's very quiet here. There's no friends.
No.
Everybody's gone. Everybody, and again, when you're that close with people for that long, to me, it's almost like your family. They're brothers and sisters.
And living with them.
Yes.
That's the thing.
Yes.
It's not just daytime. You're living with them.
24/7.
Yep.
So I go home. Both my brothers are gone and left. They don't live at home, so it's just me and my mom. And the crickets.
And the stepdad?
Oh no, he was gone by that time.
Okay.
She actually had finally managed to get away from him, although he was persistent in trying to get back over the years.
Yeah.
He would find her and weasel his way back in. But anyway.
But that had to be a better place to come back to, at least.
Yeah. Actually, the one thing that I ever did that hurt him, and I wasn't setting out to hurt him, but speaking of Mount Vernon, was when I graduated. When I graduated from school, he wanted to come down to Academy for my graduation. And, pat himself on the back at what a good kid he raised, and because I accomplished a lot when I was at school.
Yeah.
And most of my accomplishments were fueled by him telling me I would be nothing. So I told my mother that he really wasn't welcome at my graduation. I didn't want to see him at my graduation. Mm-hmm. And he said apparently he relayed through her that well, he just might come anyway. And I remember exactly what I said, and I said, well, tell him if he comes, don't expect the Hallelujah chorus when he arrives. So I didn't realize how deeply that actually hurt him, but I guess that hurt him quite a lot. And my thing was, I'm not going to let you come here and claim responsibility for the things that I achieved.
Right.
This is my moment, not your moment.
And especially with his closing remarks to you as he drops you off or whatever, that you're never going to accomplish anything.
Again, as I was a freshman heading off to school, he basically told me I would be nothing, and when I failed, that I was going to come, they would yank me out of school and take me home, and that would be the end of that experiment. So, when I got to school, my determination was, okay, I'm going to do everything I can do. My freshman year, I was class president. I was in every sport I could join.
Yeah.
I was in choir. I was in this. I was in that. I was in the other thing. I did as much as I could do to make an impact. Mm-hmm. And I had a really good experience for the most part. I mean, everything is not 100%, a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah.
But I had a really good experience there, and I hate to give him credit for anything that I did there, but a lot of it was probably fueled by him telling me that I would be nothing.
Yeah. So you graduate, and so you move back home.
I moved back home, and I don't know what to do with myself.
All right.
All my friends are gone.
Yeah.
I'm not going to college.
Okay.
So here I sit. What do I do with myself? Well, I guess now you go get a minimum wage job, right? That's what you do. So I went and got a minimum wage job.
Okay.
Because I thought, well, college is just for rich kids.
Mm.
And I'm not one. So here's what you do. You go, break your back for somebody and make a low wage.
Yeah. What'd you do?
So I worked for a rental company.
Like car rental or
no,
machine
equipment rental.
Yeah.
Tables, chairs, party supplies, things
Okay.
like that. So I did that for 3 or 4 or 5 years. And, it wasn't a bad job. It just certainly wasn't a career. It was nothing that would ever make enough money for me that I would be able to have a decent standard of living.
Yeah.
And I did that for 3 or 4 years. And if they had paid me a decent wage, I probably would have continued because I didn't mind the work. It was good, respectable work. It just didn't pay the bills.
Yeah.
One day I saw some guy get hurt, and I think they laid him off because he was hurt, and eventually they just let him go. And I just thought, wow, if that's the kind of company this is, I need to find somewhere else to be.
Yeah.
Because you're one injury away from getting fired, basically.
All right. Now, it strikes me that our paths crossed at Camp Mohaven, this summer camp. So I'm thinking, how many summers did you work there? 2 summers. So 85 was one of those years.
I worked there 84 and 85.
84 and 85. So
I met you in 85.
I met you in 85, right? I was your camper, and you were my counselor.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
All right. So 85, you're still in high school?
Mm-hmm. I graduated 85, so that was the summer after my graduation.
All right. So this is before you actually get back home then
Yes.
and have nothing to do.
Right.
And so again, for those of you that yet understand, so Doug's going from a situation where he's 24/7 with all his friends, and then when graduation, you can extend it a little bit by going to camp and work for about another 2 months.
Right.
And there you are. You're again 24/7 with all your friends and all these campers and all this kind of stuff. Did you like working at Mohaven?
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah.
That was, where else can you go swimming, go canoeing, go horseback riding, hang around with your friends, and get paid to do it?
Right. And there's girls.
And there's girls.
Yes.
Yes. Don't forget girls.
Don't forget girls.
Yeah, so it's glorified babysitting.
Yeah.
Most of the kids are old enough that, you were old enough. I didn't have to watch your every move. You were doing your little classes during the day. I had to make sure you got up in the morning and you were in the cabin at night. For the rest of the day, you were pretty much running around having fun too.
That's exactly right. Now, I look at pictures like on Facebook, and I look at you, and I remember I was just past week, I was looking like, my God, I was like, you're like just this lean. The girls must have loved you. Come on, Doug.
No, I don't know. I don't know about that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I had girlfriends along the way, but I never thought of myself as being anything special.
Yeah.
If girls were loving me, I probably was unaware of it.
Well, I think I went to Mohaven numerous years as a camper, and then staff. I was there for about 4 or 5 years, I think. And if I'm correct in my memory, at one point in time, I was with you during teen camp, and I think one night we were going to go over to the girls' side, and that look in your face tells me maybe you weren't the counselor who did this, but one of the counselors said, "All right, whatever you're going to do, I just don't know about it." And so off we went, and our whole crew. We drew out the map. We went up by Aunt Lucy's Nature Center. We knew exactly through the woods. We had black paint on. We knew what we were doing. We went to the exact cabin we wanted. We took every bathing suit and towel.
Oh, funny.
And then we took it out and put it all out in front of the lodge out there by the flagpole. and snuck back. It was a glorious night. It was like we thought we were Black Ops. It was great. but yeah, I remember. Yeah, I remember you as my counselor, and then I ran into you years later.
Yeah, I remember
in Cleveland
playing tennis one time.
Gerald
and Paul.
Yes. All right. No, that's cool. So let's back up a little bit. So after Mohaven, 2 summers, you head back home. You're working this other job for a couple years with the rental company. Then what happens?
Well, actually, a couple of years I worked, and then I actually decided to go into the Marine Corps reserves. But again, it was one of those things where I didn't have any real prospects. I didn't really have a path. Mm-hmm. So I was trying to make a path. And I thought, well, if I can go into Marine Corps, then I can get the GI Bill, then maybe I can go to school and maybe I can learn something and maybe I can make something more of myself.
Okay.
So that was sort of the plan.
All right. Did you talk to your dad about this?
No, not really. It was just sort of a decision I made.
Didn't talk to Mom?
Mom was aware, but at that point, I'm 19, 20 years old, and I was always rather independent, so it was just choice I made, and here's my choice.
Okay.
This is what I'm going to do.
So you said to go into the Marine Reserves. So what's the distinction there between a Marine and the Marine Reserves?
Well, if you ask a Marine, they're going to tell you there's quite a distinction.
Okay.
I went through boot camp, but I wasn't stationed on a base for 2 years.
Okay.
I went to boot camp. I did everything that the other Marines would do, or other people in the military would do, but afterwards you get assigned to a reserve center. And that's when you go in one weekend out of the month, or a couple of weeks out of the summer, and you should be honing your skills and basically staying sharp in case the country needs you.
Should be, you said.
Well, we did.
Okay.
We had a good unit, and we had a good commander, and we worked really hard. But I know that there's a lot of reserve units that either get a bad rap or that maybe don't train as hard as they could.
All right.
So it's not for me to say.
Okay.
I really don't know. I can only speak from my own experience, and I know that we worked really hard.
All right. Where did you go for boot camp?
Parris Island.
Okay. So you head down to Parris Island. Mm-hmm. How anxious were you?
Well, I was anxious. I was excited to go, and nervous. I was nervous and excited. But I remember that when you go to the MEPS, they call it the government building downtown in Cleveland, where they process all the military people coming in. You go in and you swear in, and you do all your medical checks and things that they need to do before they send you out.
Right.
And right before they send you out, they give you your orders, and a Marine sergeant comes out and he says, okay, here's what's going to happen. You're going to go to Cleveland, you're going to get on a plane, you're going to go, to Atlanta, have a layover, you get on another plane. When you get to South Carolina, you're going to get there and you're going to report in. You're going to go report into the Marine liaison. So it sort of sounded like we had a nice little set of instructions.
Yeah.
Well, that's not really what happened. We got on the plane. We went to Atlanta. That all worked out fine. As soon as we got off the plane in South Carolina, it might have been North Carolina. Wherever we got off the plane, there was no go meet the Marine liaison. The Marine liaison was standing right at the door when we got there, and he said, you, get in line. And so at that point, your whole perspective on life changes a little bit, because you're not your own anymore.
And you're right there with regular civilians as well.
Oh yeah, we're coming out of the tunnel.
In the airport.
Coming out of the tunnel.
And he's immediately barking orders.
Right, okay. Because they send you out with your orders, and you've got this little file that you're carrying with you. So you stand out. So he knew exactly who he was there to get, and he knew exactly who they were when they came out of the tunnel, and you get in line. And he marched us down to this little building, or to this little room in the basement of the airport. We sat there for hours. And when we got there, it was a pretty large room, like a big classroom. Desks all over the place. And he, told everybody to sit down, and you sat down. And he gave us this little camouflage book of military knowledge and said, sit there and read. Don't say anything. Don't look up. Don't talk. Don't do anything. You sit there and you read and you shut up until we tell you not to. So that's what we did. And as planes would come in from various places in the country,
the room fills up. Yeah,
the room fills up, exactly. So we're there. I mean, we left early in the morning from Cleveland, so I want to say we got there, let's say midday.
Yeah.
We were there till the dark hours of the night.
Oh my!
Let's say we were there till midnight. Let's say we sat there for 12 hours reading. How
thick is this book?
Oh, it's
an
good.
inch and a half.
Good size stuff, and you just get to the end and start reading again.
Oh my gosh!
So that's it. You just have to sit there. So for all you guys going into the military, have fun.
Happy reading.
Right. So as the room fills up, I don't know, let's say 1 o'clock in the morning, they tell us all to get up, and they march us out, and there's a bunch of buses, and they load the buses up, and off we go. So we ride for what seems like another couple of hours in silence. Then eventually we pull up, everybody's sleeping and trying to rest, but eventually we pull up to Paris Island, and it's very ominous. You pull up in the middle of the night, and you don't see anybody anywhere. It's just calm, and I don't know. It's just something from a movie.
Yeah.
And you pull up, and the buses pull up.
Is it foggy? I'm picturing fog.
It's hazy. Let's just say it's hazy. But there are overhead lights, casting the cones of light as you go down the road, and anybody that's been a Marine knows what I'm getting ready to tell you. You pull up, and they park the buses. And a drill instructor comes on the bus, and he says, my name is drill instructor so-and-so, and he's very calm, but he's very professional.
Yeah.
And he tells you exactly what's getting ready to happen in the next couple of minutes. And he says, when I give the command, you're going to get off this bus as quickly as you can. And they've got little footprints painted on the sidewalk. And he says, you're going to get out there, and you're going to find a set of footprints, and you're going to get on those footprints, and you're going to fill those footprints up from front to back, from left to right. And you're going to do it quickly. On my command, you're going to do that. And as soon as he says go, it's like a drill instructor volcano. Drill instructors just come out of nowhere, and they're in your face, and they're yelling at you, and like your whole life just instantly turns to chaos. And I just remember going, oh my goodness, what did I do to myself? What did I do? And they line you all up, and they put you in a building, and they make you read some more. And you sit in that building, and they do contraband checks one by one. They call you up, and before they send you, and I'm sorry if I'm lengthy on this.
No, please.
Before they send you, the recruiter will tell you, don't take anything you don't need.
Such as like magazines?
Anything.
Listen, just take deodorant and clothing.
If that. Take a pencil and some writing paper. That's it. So one by one, they march you up to a little desk, and you stand there, and they empty out your pockets, and you put everything on the desk, and they go, you don't need that, and it all goes in a trash can. Next.
Are you kidding?
No, they actually, that's pretty much what they do.
Now, Doug actually did just scrape everything on the table onto the floor for dramatic effect, and it was pretty impressive.
But they take everything you brought that they decide you don't need and was extra, right in the trash can it goes, and next guy comes up, and
join us in the children's library as we wrap up our block week of celebrating the week of the young child. Join us in the children's library.
Now that woman is on our podcast. All right.
Okay.
So, all right, so they go through all your stuff. They throw anything that means anything to you is now in the trash.
Well, anything that they deem unnecessary.
Yeah.
If you have a little picture of your mom or your girlfriend or something, they basically, say, okay, here you go. That's what you get. And everything else goes in the trash.
Do you remember them throwing anything that you wanted away?
You know what? I heeded my drill instructor's advice. I didn't really take anything with me.
All right.
That was... But I watched everybody else's things going into the garbage, going, silly man, silly boy, shouldn't have brought that, should you have? And then, but it's really, if I don't want to get off on a political rant, but if the rest of the government operated as efficiently and systematically as they do when they process you into military, we'd be a lot better off, because it's like an assembly line. It's just an assembly line of people.
Yeah.
And the first 2 days that you're there, they march you here, and they give you everything from your underwear to your uniforms to whatever, and they give you a big sea bag, and they say, okay, they got 100 guys standing there, and they say, okay, you got 3 pairs of underwear, or 5 pairs of underwear. Put one on your head, one in your mouth, one in each hand, and one on your body. And everybody's got to stand there with, one underwear here, one pulled over your head, one hanging from your mouth, and one on your body.
You're kidding me.
No. And that's how they make sure everybody has it. Okay, you have it, now put it in your sea bag. And you stick it in your sea bag. Okay, now you got 5 T-shirts. Put one on, one in your mouth, one on your head, one in each hand, Okay, you got 5 T-shirts.
And are they laughing at you at this, or are they just telling you look ridiculous?
No, it's just how they do it. You feel ridiculous, but that's how they do it. And so, but they've got 100 guys, and if you got 100 guys all standing here, looking the same, if somebody doesn't look the same, it stands out right away, and they know, okay, he lost one or he doesn't have it. And so they give you your clothing. They send you to the barber shop, and you ever see people shearing sheep?
Yeah.
That's sort of what the haircut's like. You get your haircut off in probably 10 seconds or less.
Oh,
they put you forward, they go back to front, tilt you back, go front to back, and you're gone. And they cut it so closely that it actually hurts your scalp. I mean, they cut it close.
Yeah.
But, they can give 100 guys a haircut in 10 minutes.
Yeah. And
then off you go.
Yeah.
So it's just, the first 2 days is a whirlwind of just processing, getting all the stuff that you need, getting physicals, getting shots, getting, you name it.
Yeah.
Soup to nuts. But they have a schedule to keep.
Yeah.
And they keep it. So it's just right down the line.
They've been doing this for a while.
Exactly. They got it down to a science. They know what they're doing, and they know how to do it. And so those first couple of days, your head's spinning because things are just going so fast.
And so you head down there, and you generally don't know anyone. Is that correct?
Actually, no. A friend of mine from Academy went.
Gerald.
Mm-hmm.
So you knew Gerald from...
Gerald and I went in together.
All right. So just so everybody knows, I'm not going to mention Gerald's last name, but Gerald, I met Gerald after he graduated. Paul and him knew each other. And so when I first moved to Cleveland in the early 90s, Gerald, Paul, and I shared an apartment. We had an apartment.
Really?
Yeah, right there on Lakeshore Boulevard in Euclid.
Okay.
So that's how I knew Gerald. And then I found out that Gerald also had known you at the Academy and there. Mm-hmm. All right. So how long are you in boot camp?
I think it's 13 weeks.
13 weeks?
13 weeks. I don't know what it is now, but that's how long we were in.
All right. And is like, in movies you'll see like Navy SEALs, there's this bell that you ring because you found that you went out. Is there anything like that here? I mean, are guys getting sent home? Are guys just quitting?
Well, I know that our attrition rate was probably 2/3. But there was no bell. There was opportunities to quit if you dare, but I think quitting was not really the fast way out, because I think graduating, you went home quicker than the quitters went home.
What?
Well, you're not worth their time if you quit, so there's no rush. There's no rush to get you home. Quitting just gets you out of training. But I think they wait until they get enough quitters, and then they send the quitters home. I'm not really sure because I didn't take that route.
Yeah.
But I know that there was people that asked to leave.
Yeah.
And I think I went home before a lot of them did.
Were you tempted to quit at any time?
Yeah, I remember one time in particular. I remember going to Gerald and saying, "You raise your hand, I'll raise my hand." And he said, "I'm not doing it." And I said,
"Why?
Okay.
What happened?"
I don't remember. I just remember that it was really, I was homesick.
Yeah.
Tired of being yelled at.
Yeah.
Tired of being punished for things I didn't do, or you don't move quick enough, you don't move fast enough, you don't move right enough. I remember one time we were cleaning our rifles.
Yeah.
Sitting on a little wooden gear locker, little foot locker, cleaning our rifles. And my hand guard, which is a little plastic piece that goes around the barrel to keep you from getting burned. My hand guard fell off my foot locker and dropped about a foot to the ground. And so for that, I was throwing my weapon around, and I got to go do push-ups. And I think
They said because that happened, that equated to throwing.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I did that intentionally. You know, that's how they paint the picture.
Yeah.
And it's all a game. Everything they do is
Yeah.
for a reason. But you know, if you can't handle somebody yelling at you or screaming at you or making you do some exercise, then what are you going to do when bullets start flying?
Right.
Right.
That's correct.
So there's a reason to the why, or to what they're doing. But anyway, my handguard fell, so I got to go up. They have this area that's called the quarterdeck, and you go up to the quarterdeck, and you know they start doing push-ups, do push-ups, and it was middle of summer, probably 100 degrees out, 110, whatever. That day we were we were cleaning weapons indoors because it was too hot to train outdoors.
Okay.
They actually have little benchmarks. If it gets certain hot, certain humidity, then you can't go. So they find other ways to train you. So we were cleaning our weapons, and anyway, I got to go to the quarterdeck. So I did push-ups, and it's funny because they get in a frenzy. They don't like to have just one person doing push-ups.
Yeah.
That, you know, if one person starts, that means there's room for more people.
Yeah.
So they might just find random people who they owe one, or just somebody who they haven't seen up there for a while. Okay, you, get up there with him, start doing push-ups. So now we're all doing push-ups. And I remember I'm doing push-ups and sweating profusely to the point where my hands were slipping on the concrete. So I would have to push up and walk over to a dry spot. So that my hands wouldn't slide out from under me.
Yeah.
And so I did push-ups, and they brought a group up, and they did what they call wear you out. You know, they push you up till you can't push up.
Yeah.
So they brought a group up and wore them out and sent them back. And they brought up another group and kept me there. Brought the second group up, wore them out. Brought a third group up and wore them out. And I was still there the whole time. So I was absolutely dead. And
They just refused to let you go, or you were still able to keep going?
No, you go when they tell you can go.
Oh my gosh.
So eventually, you know, I got to be done doing push-ups. But that's just the kind of thing you do.
Did you ever drop that handguard again?
Oh, heck no. No way, are you kidding me? But
All right.
you know, there's certain things they do, and if you're, the one good thing my recruiter told me was don't ever be last. Don't be last at anything, and don't be first at anything.
Why? Why not be
stand
first?
out.
Okay.
You don't want to stand out. So for the biggest part of boot camp, I was invisible.
All right.
I didn't attract their attention, which means I didn't get punished as much as a lot of other guys did.
All right.
So that was fine with me.
So you said 14 weeks this last.
13 weeks,
Okay.
I think, yeah.
So it ends, and had you already determined going in that you were going to be a reserve?
Yeah.
Okay, so you knew that at the end of this thing, you were going to head
Back home.
back home. Okay. So you and Gerald both went in to be Marine Reserves then?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's all done. You guys head back home.
Right.
For how long? Until you're called?
Well, you know, we got to train, I think, for actually probably 6 years. It was the year I was supposed to get out, 92. 91. 91, when Desert Storm happened.
Okay, so let me see.
I was almost finished with my contract. I was 6 months away from being done with that.
And you were still going to get the GI Bill and everything by being reserve, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was probably about 6 months away from being discharged, maybe 8 months away from being discharged, and you know, just sent on my way. Thank you for your service.
And then
Desert Storm, Operation Desert Storm, comes up, and they decide to activate the reserves, which means now you're active duty.
you're the real deal, Holyfield.
Yeah. So they sent us actually, I think we got phone calls. We got phone calls and said you need to report, on Friday at 1700 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And this is it. We're going.
All right. Where did you go?
Well, actually, I didn't go anywhere of note. It was kind of traumatic because I thought I was going to war.
Okay.
My family thought I was going to war.
Yeah.
Everybody thought I was going to war, and when I left them, that was the understanding.
And they're thinking, this is the last time we're going to see Doug.
Possibly.
Potentially.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
And to make it more ironic to me, or at least it rang more true with me, was the deadline that our president gave them. The deadline was on January 16th. That was my birthday. So I thought, oh gee, the deadline could be the day I die.
The same day you were born.
Right. So that wasn't lost on me. I just remember thinking about that, like, oh my goodness, what if?
Yeah. You have to live through this day. You have to live.
Yeah. Well, that's what I did. Was I didn't know what was going to happen to me once we left.
Okay.
And I determined to myself that I'm coming home. Period. I don't care what I got to do. I don't care who I have to kill, quite frankly.
Yeah.
I'm coming home. End of story.
No questions about it.
No. And so I, at that point, determined I'm going to be as mad as I can be. I'm going to be as angry as I can be. Because if I have to pull the trigger on somebody, I don't want to have a second's thought about it.
Because I'm going home.
I'm going home.
Yeah.
And I determined in my mind that that's how I was going to get myself home, was to make myself just so mad that I was going to kill the whole Iraqi army if I had to, to get home.
Yeah. Well, we're going to stop right there for this episode, but be sure to download part 2 of my conversation with Doug. In that episode, he's going to explain what happened to him after he left Desert Storm. He'll talk about his life after the war, marriage, children, work, and finally, love. So, be sure to like us on Facebook and tell a friend about this podcast. And remember, everybody has a story.